One of the first skills you learn how to perform in general chemistry is when you're given an elemental symbol, being able to determine the number of electrons, protons, and neutrons in that atom. So when you're given the elemental symbol, you are actually given information about these three species. The first one is the number of protons, and that is given with the elemental symbol and also with the atomic number Z that is written right before it. So most of the times they won't give you Z, but they will give you the elemental symbol. So whenever element is written there, that tells us how many protons are inside of the nucleus. The mass number, written as a superscript before the symbol, the mass number is equal to the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. So if we take the mass number and subtract the number of protons from it, that gives us the number of neutrons. So we'll find the number of neutrons from the mass number, and the number of protons we'll already know from the elemental symbol. So to find the charge number is a relationship between the number of protons and the number of electrons. So if we want to find the number of electrons, if we take the charge number and subtract the number of protons off of that, and then you take the negative of that number, that will tell you how many electrons are inside of there. So an example here, we have beryllium. So that's very easy. The number of protons is 4. The number of neutrons is our mass number minus the number of protons, so 10 minus 4. That means this element has 6 neutrons inside of there. We have 4 protons, but we have a charge number of 0. So 0 minus 4 gives us negative 4, and then if we change that value, we get that we have 4 electrons inside of there. So the charge number minus the atomic number, or the number of protons, if we take the negative of that number, that tells us how many electrons that we have in there. So this element, because it is neutral, we can take a shortcut with this, that because it's neutral, the number of protons must equal the number of electrons. So we've already determined that the number of protons is equal to 4. Because it's neutral, this also must equal to the number of electrons. The number of electrons we have is 4. So when we look at this element, once again, we want to find the number of protons. That's going to be the subscript, but it's also told in the fact that we're dealing with the element boron. Boron has 35 protons. To find the number of neutrons, we take the mass number, which is 80, and subtract the number of protons from that. So 80 minus 35 gives us 45 neutrons. Then here, if I take the charge number, which is minus 1, and subtract the number of protons off of there, that gives us the total negative charge. So if we just change the sign on that, we get that there are 36 electrons. So this is a formal way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, it says that if this element was neutral, we would need to have 35 electrons, but it has a negative charge, which means that it has 1 more electron than it does protons. So we know that we have 36 electrons. So that is kind of an easier way of thinking about it. This is a formal way of doing it, but you got to remember that the charge is equal to the number of protons minus the number of electrons. And if we know that the charge number is minus 1, and we know that we have 35 protons, that the number of electrons must be 36. So you can either do it conceptually, or you can actually do the mathematical version of it, but either way will give you the right number of electrons. So there's a few different ways we can ask these questions in terms of the relative amount of protons, neutrons, and electrons in a given element. So here's another one. I tell you that an element has 20 protons, 20 neutrons, and 18 electrons. The first question is, what element is it? So I go to the periodic table, I find what element has 20 protons. Above the elemental symbol, there'll be the number 20, and that's calcium. Then it asks, what's the atomic number? That's the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. So 20 plus 20 is equal to 40. And with this, I say, what's the charge number? Charge number is equal to the number of protons minus the number of electrons. So the number of protons is 20, the number of electrons is 18, so the charge number would be plus 2. Here's another variation. I say an atom has 13 neutrons and 10 electrons. And if it is a cation with a charge of +1, what is the correct symbol? So this one's a little bit trickier. So the first thing I want to find is the number of protons, because that gives me information about everything else. So if I've told you it has 10 electrons, and I told you that it has a charge of +1, that tells me that the number of protons is going to be equal to 11. So remember, the charge number is equal to the number of protons minus the number of electrons. If I want to solve for the number of protons, I think about it conceptually. What number, minus 10 gives me +1. The number of protons must be 11. Now that I have that number, everything else comes into place. So when I look at the elemental symbol, I go to the periodic table and say what element has 11 protons. That's sodium. And then I say the mass number is equal to the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. So 11 plus 13 gives me 24. So if I draw out the elemental symbol, it will look like this.